So today we're going to start by talking about the weather. It's December 9th, 2019. Kind of cold.
Kind of snowy.
Kind of snowy. It's about 0 degrees Celsius. It's bright though.
For a few hours at least.
For a few hours of the day, it's nice. Sun sets at about
4:30 p.m.
Yeah, and the reason we wanted to talk about the weather is because it's also exam season right now.
Yeah, it's probably the two worst seasons.
Yeah.
Exam season and what we call Smarch.
Explain Smarch to the people.
Smarch is the months of probably the end of November all the way through March. And it's this weird...
A little bit of April too.
A little bit of April.
It's basically about half the year.
Half the year. Around here it is kind of grey. Like the ground is grey. The grass doesn't have any green in it. It just turns grey. The salt from the roads just kind of tinges everything.
Yeah.
From your shoes to your pets. There's those little piles of snow on the side of the road.
Yeah, we really like winter. We like Home Alone and Christmas movies and everything looking
Mm-hmm.
picturesque and, tinkly Christmas music and freshly fallen snow. The problem is it's very rarely like that.
Yeah. Like maybe first thing in the morning you wake up and there's like a fresh layer of snow and that's okay, but then by the time you get outside it's just all gone. Anyway, so it's hard to stay in a great mood with that weather, but we're managing.
Exam season, it really just kind of compounds the misery and the stress. Alicia was just telling me about how stressed she is for an exam she has in a couple days, or tomorrow actually.
But the thing is, this is my third year of school,
Right.
And besides maybe first year chemistry, I've never been really stressed with this one class. I just can't handle it. Because it's not even hard, it's just it's a lot.
Meanwhile, I take a lot of fun classes. So instead of exams, I usually just have projects. So the upcoming week, I have a big storyboard I have due, and I have I'm writing a scene from a play for one of my classes. So my classes usually they get creative options for the end of year assignments.
And I get upset that I have no creative options.
Well, you should have taken a fun
I
degree.
thought management and sustainability would be cool. That they'd be like, hey, make this fun idea for a company. But no. It's more like, what's a stock?
Anyway, so today we wanted to talk about kind of the behind-the-scenes design philosophy of the podcast, because that's what's been on our mind recently.
It's been our creative outlet during this kind of grey time of year.
Yeah, a lot of months we're just kind of locked inside, so reading, designing, recording like this, there's not too much adventuring that can really go on, so we have to think inward, hibernate, deepen our philosophies.
Bring the adventure to us through color.
Yeah, sure. So where did we want to start with that?
Well, we wanted to we were trying to figure out what to do for this week's episode. We were going to talk about the carbon cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Which at this time of year, we don't need any more boring.
Yeah.
We wanted to just make something kind of just educational and basic.
We thought that would be cool. We thought it could be kind of themed after university classes, right? So we were going to call it something like Carbon Cycle 101 or Climate Change 101. And we might do that episode later. We're not writing that off. It's just that it would need some work, I think, structurally, because neither of us are really practiced in delivering lectures.
No. But the thing is, we decided to go with what we've been working on a week, which is kind of the aesthetic of the podcast. Not working on it, but this is what's been on our minds in our free time.
Usually, if you want to talk about something, it's best to just talk about what you've been thinking about, because then it's fresh.
And so we thought we'd start by explaining the logo.
It is a picture of some trees with a strange purple glow.
Just right in the middle.
Right in the middle of them.
And you might think, what's that glow? And there's a few answers to that question. One is we thought it would be kind of evoking the image of a cell phone out in the woods.
Yeah.
Which is something we're not a fan of, because it's if you're out in nature, we feel like you should just put the technology and the nature should be separate. There should be two separate things. And so that's kind of, the image is there's a positive side and a negative side. So that's the negative side. What's the positive side, Aaron?
I guess the positive side is that the technological aspect of the image, so that kind of purple rectangular glow, is not, or we tried to make it so it isn't immediately threatening or intimidating. It's more intriguing. It shows that there are possibilities with technology. If we wanted to make a simple podcast and spread the simple message that technology's bad, that's really easy to do. We could have done that.
Yeah.
But it's something a little bit more complex, which is technology can be really good, but the current integration, especially with the natural world, is not good.
Yes. And our inspiration for the actual square or rectangle itself was from Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, if anyone's seen that movie, there are these very mysterious monoliths that appear throughout, and they kind of represent jumps in human civilization and development and technology. So that's what that movie's about, and kind of fits the theme well.
Yeah, so that's the logo.
Yeah, so when
the color itself.
Yeah, when we talk about expanding from the logo, obviously there's the color.
Yes.
A pinkish purple, magenta, interesting. Well, let's just talk about colors. What kind of colors do you like, Alicia?
I like new colors.
New colors.
So it's like, you could just say, I could say I like bold colors, but that's not always the case. I like when they're muted, but when they're like different. If you were to look at, like, go into a store, I feel like everything usually meshes together. There's like a collage of colors, but no matter if they're bright or muted, like, they still work. But there's these new colors that you'll find, kind of like that purple, that it's like, if you saw that on a shelf, you'd be like, I feel like it would stand out because it's not something that we see every day.
So you mean colors that are like ahead of the design curve?
Yeah, or like when you go into a thrift store and there's a color that probably once was really bright, but then it's faded into this color of its own.
Okay.
So, I don't know, new colors.
Because it has depth to it.
Because
because it hints at once being something else.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the current design moment, the zeitgeist. What are some popular colors that we see, maybe too popular, that we see all over the place?
People just wear black and white way too much, I think. And I mean, like, I'm a victim of that.
I like black and white, it's cool.
It is cool, but I mean, I'm trying to think of colors
that
we see a lot
mustard
of.
yellow is really
in.
that's
having a moment, yes.
I think slime yellow green is kind of in as well in design terms.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Kind of like Kids' Choice Award slime.
Oh.
Color. Or is that orange though?
Nickelodeon is orange.
I don't know.
So you just think kind of like bright yellow, green.
No, I just mean those specific ones. I guess neon orange is in. I guess a lot of people wear those hats. Mm-hmm. I went through a moment a couple of years ago where I was like, I'm going to wear a lot of neon. But it didn't work.
No, neon doesn't go well with many
things.
Yes.
So talking about the purple.
The purple.
You say it looks like a new color. It's new and exciting.
I think so, because it's not neon, but it's also not just a boring, pale.
I think it's very sci-fi. Reminds me of the Jetsons.
You're right.
That's why I like it, because... So basically, this episode's about the design identity of the podcast, and we're trying to figure this out and grow it and just develop it into something kind of cohesive, but not really... not samey, not one note. So we want it to be varied, and this is where the difficulty lies, because what we know about the podcast right now is basically what's in that logo, in that one image, which is the kind of foundation of its visuals anyway, of its aesthetic, is this contrast between the natural world and this super advanced technological future that we seem to be living in or looking at. So when we're thinking of that latter part, or the technological aspect, we were just trying to think of a color, I think, that summed that up best. And that's how we arrived upon the purple.
Yeah, because you could go with silver or something, but...
Yeah, we were looking at silver as well.
No.
I also like anime. I think anime was kind of an inspiration for that color for me anyway. Things like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, because they are, especially older ones, because they contrast these really bright colors with kind of a grainier...
image.
Grainier image, yeah, image quality.
Yes.
So that's where that was the inspiration for that color purple, and we want to go with similar kind of cool colors, blue, purple, and just probably a whole array of greens. So that's colors. Alicia, you've mentioned before that you like fashion and clothes. What do you like about those? What kind of clothes and ideas in the clothes do you look for?
Recently, I've been very into Victorian era dresses, kind of inspired by the designer Alexa Chung. She mixes traditionally masculine and feminine aesthetics very well, and she's always wearing these incredibly frilly dresses that I've been kind of thinking about how if anybody was to just go outside in one of those like frilly dresses like she does, I mean, she lives in New York or London depending on the time of the year, like that's fine there, but I feel like people should be able to, this is my current, what I've been thinking of, to wear whatever and not feel out of place. It's kind of, I feel like that's kind of the design or the fashion trend at the moment, is just people wearing, like, express themselves, but I think it's becoming there's like the hipster aesthetic of just like really bright things, probably from the 80s.
I think that's true of all of design at the moment. So be it fashion, or be it just kind of general typography, or even literature or film or anything like that. The whole kind of outward movement is characterized by express yourself, be wild, mix and match, be crazy,
but then there's just
look different.
This is aesthetic that has arisen from that, and
exactly.
It's just the exact same, and everybody does it.
That's kind of the irony, that a whole movement of express yourself and be different has ended up with everyone looking the same, because everyone's trying to look different in the same way.
Yes, and that's funny. What I'm kind of like, I wish the sentiment of this fashion moment was like, the sentiment was in line with what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Because I just kind of sometimes I want to wear a really frilly dress. That's not who I am, but sometimes I see the dress and I'm like, I would love to wear this, but if I wore it, it just would be incredibly uncomfortable, I think.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely, that will just happen naturally. People will, like, artistic movements and changes and trends, like trends will always happen. Yeah. That's just the thing. And
I feel like they're usually driven by people trying to be different, is just like what trends are.
Well, not always trying to be different, but they end up being different from what was the norm, and then they establish their difference as the new norm, basically. Mm-hmm. One thing we mentioned when we were talking about this episode was the idea of a sustainability aesthetic, which is pretty common, especially on Instagram. You see a lot of pages, and maybe even just reading their bio and their name, you can sometimes kind of predict what the page will look like. Mm-hmm. And what does that look like?
It's usually a lot of white negative space, and it's because I think the sustainability trend right now is minimalism. So it's like, oh, look how minimalist I am, I don't own a lot of things, and that's great, but it doesn't mean everything you own has to be white, silver, baby pink. Like, I feel like that's just how it is. And
pale green,
yes, a lot of like eucalyptus.
Yeah.
So it's just like, that doesn't have to be, you don't have to own all those things in that color scheme.
Well, especially when we're talking about an environmental / sustainable movement, trying to get more people on board in society. Something like that is not super inclusive, because it sounds kind of shallow when we're talking about how aesthetics can bring people in or make people reject the idea, but that's true in life, right? Like,
yeah, and it's
how things look
more
and how things
popular.
How things look, feel, sound. So basically the surface level of, because we're inundated with so many different ideas and different quote-unquote social movements and identities like that, there is definitely a huge element of judging things on the surface.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will definitely judge the content of those kind of sustainability and ethical and environmental ideas by their aesthetic.
Yeah, and I'm sure, well, I know just from experience, that aesthetic definitely draws in a certain group of people that are usually already kind of sustainably minded, or like already really into just like homemaking, cooking. Like, I feel like that kind of, it caters to that group. But there's, for the environmental movement, we want to get literally every single person on board, so we need a more inclusive aesthetic.
So that's what we're going for. That's why we are not trying to just be similar to other people, but also not being different for the sake of it. We want everything we do to have a meaning behind it. Mm-hmm. And we mentioned part of that meaning being like a juxtaposition between nature and technology. And another part of it, I think, is kind of embodied even in this episode, which is kind of a postmodern transparency of design. So bringing people into the design process, sharing ideas, sharing our thoughts behind what we end up doing. Because we were mentioning that even 30, 40, 50 years ago, if there was a company or a startup trying to establish itself, it wouldn't be releasing its prototypes and its design discussions and iterations and drafts and mock-ups. But now that is the design. Yeah, that is the design now. I think that is the design moment, is sharing your blueprints and sharing your ideas.
Yeah,
and lifting the curtain and bringing other people in and letting them see.
Exactly, because I think it makes it more inclusive, because people, even if...
It's just cool. You see that with vlogging, like, it's about being behind the scenes, and kind of authenticity is kind of praised above everything else in today's world. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see like a lot of big companies online trying to kind of get on that movement. It's kind of ironic coming from huge companies, because they're obviously like they're just trying to catch the aesthetic, but they're not actually living it. When you see things like Wendy's and Arby's like tweeting about you know what I mean, tweeting like behind the scenes stuff. And
yeah, I feel like at first when this transparency trend came through and I was like watching YouTube videos and would see people, it'd be like the first 7 minutes of their 10-minute video would be like behind the scenes, and the last 3 minutes would be the actual video. I feel like this thing has a place, but that's not the place. Like if you're wanting to be a filmmaker...
No, I disagree.
I don't know.
I think that's an interesting idea in any kind of art, is basically turning the camera on the camera, I think is what best sums up this artistic moment we're in. And that's what an episode like this is about, turning the camera on the camera. So
yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, yeah, did you have any kind of general design or artistic things that you like and things that you value, or certain types of certain styles, anything like that?
Yeah, I think we're pretty different when it comes to our design aesthetics. Well, like the foundation of them, but then they kind of manifest in the same way. I just love historical design.
But what
I feel
kind
like
of
everybody
historical
does.
design? I mean?
Just like mainly Victorian. I really like how churches look, like basilicas and stuff. How the stained glass and then the metal.
So the very classic, ornate kind of...
Like when there's gold leaf on things, I just love it. And when there's a painting, I like how the frame is gold sometimes. That's just kind of big inspiration for me.
Okay.
There's a museum where we live that we go to, and everything's kind of like, it's all interesting. But then there's this one room and it has these like Renaissance paintings in it. Then you get in there and you just feel like the aura of the painting kind of like hit you like a wall, and it's like, whoa, this is gorgeous.
But we talked about that in previous episodes, which is the religious significance which art used to be treated with. Yeah. And literally it's because a lot of it used to be religious art, and that's kind of gone down these days. But it doesn't have to be any kind of traditional religion or spirituality. It's just about holding something to such a high regard that you want to frame it with this very ornate, pristine, golden frame or anything like that.
Yeah, but I feel like that was the case with everything that people were designing until like fairly recently, probably pre-industrial revolution. Every building that was created was like, this is a work of art, but now people make buildings and it's just this glass. Like,
oh, you don't like glass?
Well, I like glass when it's done tastefully, but I feel like there's just this in the 50s when like the post-World War II, when they were building all of those just concrete cubes.
Okay, you mean modernism?
Modernism. They have their place, but when there's so many of them, I feel like no one really takes pride. No one would be like, this is the building I made, because it's just kind of like, meh.
It was about functionality more than anything.
Yeah, that's fair.
Our campus, we often discuss its architectural merits as we traverse it during Smarch. It's really a mishmash of different styles. Every building looks like it could be from a different campus and looks like it was built in a different decade. It's
a 200-year-old school, right?
I don't know.
I think so. Last year, like the 200th anniversary or something like that. So it's like, you can definitely see that when you're walking through campus, because there's the top of it and it's these buildings from the 1800s. And as you go, it's just these, as you were saying, nothing really fits together and doesn't look like there was a plan or a vibe they were going for.
Right. So what do we think about that kind of collage mindset towards putting together a body of work or a campus of buildings or something like that?
I had like written down on the things I like about design, literally just said collage, but I think there needs to be like an element of transition between the different aesthetics.
Okay.
So I don't mind when you're looking at something and it's like a painting and it's literally a collage. Some of the things are shiny, some of them are bumpy. It's just like, it looks good
texture.
If everything is put with, texture. If everything's put with intention and you're thinking, okay, how will this look next to this? Is there a transition, like in our logo, how it's not just a solid purple square, there's the pink kind of fade.
Of course, yeah.
I think I really value that transition in collages.
Yeah.
Everything needs to look intentional.
There are different ways it can be done. You know, there's the fundamental elements of visual art. It's like color, texture, shape, reflectivity or something. I think there's 4 or 5 of them. And there are different ways that you can kind of thread consistencies and links among and between those is kind of cool. And yeah, collages really sum up the design period right now, because it's about, okay, I'll take this from there, this from there, this from there, and I'll put it together and somehow it will work. That's kind of one of the things, or that kind of sums up pretty best what I like in design, which is your inspirations being really visible, like really wearing your inspirations on your sleeve. So basically, that's what a collage is. It's cutting and pasting, and I think even in music now, like hip hop's really big, and that's full of sampling, and it's not trying to be subtle. It's not trying to hide it. It wears it on its sleeve. You know, we're talking about Kanye, the king of sampling.
He really is.
Yeezy, you know, he's always talking about where the designs come from.
Yeah.
And I think also, I'm writing a book or trying to write a book. So the main thing I've learned from that is that, oh, hey, none of my ideas are coming from nowhere. Like when people ask writers like, oh, where do you get your ideas? Or designers, where do you get your ideas? The simplest answer, I think, without getting kind of spiritual or fictional about it, is subconsciously you're always collecting ideas, and then they're just being mashed together to make different things.
Yeah, my English teacher, like our first class in grade 11, she was like, every story, like everybody has this one story that everything in their life and every book they read, every movie they watch, they link it back to that original story somehow.
Yeah, that kind of speaks to our ego as well, that we just collect everything and relate it back to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because usually the story is about ourselves, right?
Well, in a way, yeah. Like hers was the allegory of the cave, and it was how like reality is a reflection of what you've been exposed to, something like that. So I feel like it's just, everything relates back to one thing, and you collect it and you make your own works of art, but nothing's truly original, I don't think.
Okay, well, talking about campus and how we find it kind of dull because it was made in such a sprawling and uninhibited and unplanned way. And there can be merits to that kind of spontaneity.
For sure.
We can be like, oh, that's cool. In this particular case, we don't think it has much artistic merit, but taking it individually, I like some of the buildings.
Yeah.
It's mostly, I think it's mostly the planning that we're not fans of.
No, we really appreciate intention.
Yeah.
But then what we were kind of discussing was in everyday life, you don't have a lot of like things that make you go, wow, at least in our city.
No, just in everyday life.
In everyday life.
There's not a lot of emphasis on art or design or niceness in general. I think that comes probably from a young age. Those things are put secondary to efficiency and a more logical, mathematical view of the world.
For sure. That's definitely kind of taken out of I feel like it's your instinct to make things look nice and to create and...
Yeah, people like nice things.
But for some reason, from a very young age, it's like, no, your focus needs to be on the technical side of things, making things more efficient, being more like utilitarian about things, like only caring about how things work, not how they look.
So that's, talking behind the scenes, we have some pretty maybe deluded ambitions for the podcast, but that's one of our kind of goals is, can we spread a little bit more aesthetic niceness around?
Yes, give people maybe feeling that they can
build some nice buildings.
Yeah, hang some nice paintings that they painted in their home. Yes, it's just to kind of inspire people to be more creative.
Yeah.
Yep.
Last semester I took a class. It was an English class, but it was more about, I think the class was called, it was called Images and Text. So it was basically about how, since ancient Greek times really, how have people described verbally or through literature visual art that they like. Okay. And one of my favorite quotes from that, when we got onto, because it kind of went through different art periods, when we got to modern art and things being much more abstract. So abstract sculptures that were just lines and shapes and things like that. There's obviously a lot of naysayers towards any kind of modern art and any kind of abstract things where they say, oh, I could make that, what's that supposed to represent? And some people, I guess, only see value in extreme realism, which is, everyone has different artistic views. But the best quote I heard about modern art was that let's say it is like a sculpture of a stone. Mm-hmm. Then my teacher said, well, if you stare at that sculpture, it really makes you gain an appreciation for its shape, its form, for just kind of texture and lines in the world and just those kind of aspects of art, which maybe just we're surrounded by all the time, but we don't focus on too much. Yeah. So basically, if you stare at that sculpture, it makes the stone more stony. Yes. Is what he said, and what I take that to be is just, it's about establishing more of an appreciation and a sense of wonder for seemingly everyday objects, especially nature, in the eye of the observer.
Yes, very cool. And that's massive inspiration for, I think, a lot of design going forward. It's just...
Yeah. I'm also, this is like a superficial thing, but I really like transparency in design. We've seen a big wave of transparency in consumer products over the last 2 decades or so. I look at like a really famous Nintendo Game Boy, which had a transparent shell so you could see the inside wirings and all that stuff. And some shoes and some fashion is kind of
those like
picking up on that for the last few
trench
years.
coats.
Yeah, the trench coats. I've seen rubber boots and obviously the off-white suitcases and all those kind of things.
Yes.
But that's the moment, so that's what I think is really cool, and it sums it up really well.
Yeah, and we think if you're making a sustainability podcast or environmental podcast, we think that it should be cool and modern and not just kind of more catering to one aesthetic. We want to be transparent and kind of let people...
Just try and not be typecast and try not to design like other designs are, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the time. Take inspiration, if you like the trends, you like the trends, but just try to look kind of different, I guess.
Yeah.
Is our message. But don't try too hard to look different.
Yes. Strike a balance between trying and not trying.
Yeah.
Like the messy bun. Anyway, I think that covers pretty much everything we're talking about, everything that was on our minds this week.
For sure. Kind of just a short and sweet episode, which is like a behind the scenes of what we've been up to.
Yes.
And maybe some hints as to where we will be going.
Very much so, yes.
Where can they find us?
They can find us on Instagram at @the_environmental.
And we release podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. The Environmental Podcast, new episode every Monday.
Hope to see you next week. Bye.